No sound. No sound. Still no sound. That's really weird. Audio. Can you hear me now? This is a different speaker, set of speakers. I wonder if you can hear me now. Oh, we can hear me now. Okay. Well, I don't know if the sound quality will be good because this is just regular sound, but we'll try with this. So thank you for letting me know we've got sound. That's great. Thank you. All right. So I was just about to say that I've been playing around with some data and just wanted to show you something that I thought was kind of fun. Recently, over the last few days, I had created a couple of videos over the last couple of weeks talking about the entry period. I'm going to show you this now. And I was just playing around with some data, and I showed this graph the other day, which shows the DV 2025 entry period and showing how much activity there was in that entry period. And we went up to a top level of about 2.71 million visits to the website, which is dvprogram.state.gov. So my conjecture, if you haven't seen my other videos, is that the number of entries is based on the number of people, or is related to the number of people that go to that website, right? So there's no public source yet on how many entries there have been in DV 2025. But there is a government website and data source that I've tapped into the API on that, so that shows us how many daily visitors there were to that site, right? And so based on that data, I can see that in my belief, this is not going to be the busiest year by any means. DV 2024 had 24 million entries. It won't be at, or 22 million, I think it was. It won't be at that level. I think it's going to be more like 15, maybe 16 million entries, which is good news because less entries means you've got more chance of selection. And incidentally, if you were selected in DV 2024, your chances of selection were very small, like the smallest it's been for a long time, something like 1 in 300 years for most places, more in Oceania, but pretty low. Okay, so anyway, this was kind of fun, and then I decided to widen the view a little bit and look back at the entry period for, not the entry period, but the server activity for the whole of this year, so since the beginning of January. And this is that entry period you can see on the screen there, but you can see this massive spike in May. What do you think that is? That's the first day that the results checking happened on in May for DV 2024, and on that day there were 11.23 million visitors. So the entry period at most this year has got 2.7 million, but the entry checking for DV 2024 had 11 million, over 11 million entries. And people often wonder why it is that when the entry period opens, the system immediately crashes. And this is why, is because there's so many people going to the servers all at the same time, and it's so unlike a normal day. So a normal day was 25,000, 30,000. That's a normal day, and then all of a sudden 11 million visitors in one day. It's very difficult to scale that quickly, and that's why they have a problem. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun. No particular point about that other than just interesting background information, right? Okay. Is any possible chance to increase the Greencard visa amount for DV 2024? I assume you mean the 55,000 visas. Absolutely not. People often get confused because they heard Joe Biden once saying he'd like to increase the visas to 80,000. And he's the president of the USA, so why can't he just do that, right? Well, unfortunately, this country works on laws, and laws have to be passed by Congress. They have to go through both houses of Congress. So Congress, the Senate, and then be signed by the president. And those organizations, those three groups, those three sections don't agree with each other very much on anything, and they particularly don't agree with each other on immigration. So just as it's difficult for Joe Biden to just make up a new rule and say, we're going to give out 80,000 visas, it's also very difficult for other people in Congress who are, frankly, who would more than happily stop the DV lottery program, just as Trump said he wanted to do. They can't just stop it because they can't get agreement between all those groups. And so it's very difficult to have any immigration reform. One day, if there were some change in the DV lottery, it would probably be removing the DV lottery. I don't think it would be an increase of visas. And certainly for DV 2024, it can't happen. Okay, so that's pretty much a clear and comprehensive answer to your question. VRL, yes, good to see you again, indeed. Okay, Bulletin for Asia is very weak. What will happen with these highly case numbers? Look, high case numbers are not going to get current. You need to understand that. It should be clear by now. I'm sorry if you've believed different, but the reality is there isn't any way that we can have that many selectees and for everyone to go current. So to explain, let me just look at this here. Asia had, in DV 2023, had 24,000 selectees and all of those weren't current. They didn't all get current, right? There's been a 16% increase in the number of selectees in DV 2024. There's now nearly 28,000 in Asia. And there were too many in DV 2023, so now we've got 4,000 more. Well, of course, there's too many, okay? What does that mean? It means that some people will miss out. Who will miss out? The highest case numbers will miss out, okay? So we're not going to see Asia go current. The same thing can be said for EU, OC, and SA. Africa region might go current, but that's only going to be a symptom of a bad thing, which is embassies misbehaving. Okay, so I don't know that I would even cheer for that either. There's certainly too many selectees this year. So no, Asia is not going to get current. So if you're thinking the highest case number, I think I've heard reported for Asia, let's see, highest case number I've heard reported is 54,000. So if you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, why isn't it going quickly to get to 54,000? It's because they're not trying to get to 54,000. That's not the point. That's not how it works. Okay, they're not trying to get to the highest case numbers. They're just trying to fill the quota. The quota is unchanged for Asia. You know, it's about, it's just under 9,000. And so there are 28,000 people selected, including derivatives, and there are 9,000, let's say there's 9,000, just round numbers. There are 9,000 green cards for that group of 28,000. So no, I'm afraid not everyone is going to get current. And it will, and the visa bulletin may appear slow to you, but that's because you're thinking they need to get to the high case numbers, and they actually don't. Okay. Next person, the introverted content creator, says the progress was decent this month. I actually thought it was pretty decent. And actually, what you say here, so this is a good point. The visa bulletin progress was decent this month, but it's still slow for the fourth bulletin. Is that a correct way of thinking about it? Yeah, I think that's fair. That's pretty much how I would see it. So let's take Africa. Africa was 10,000 for month one and month two, then went to 11,000, pitiful increase, obviously, and then doubled to 22,000 in this latest visa bulletin. So after 4 months, it's at 22,000, right? 4 months is 1/3 of a year. And so does that mean then that 3 times 22,000, we're going to get to 66,000? That's not really the right way to do the calculation. That's not how I do the calculation. But to your point, introverted content content creator, to your point, it's a bit disappointing after 4 months that that's where we're at. Now, what I would say is that we don't know the distribution yet of cases. Once we see the distribution, as I've explained before, we're going to see kind of a high density in the lower ranges and a lower density in the higher ranges, right? And what that means is that the visa bulletin, once it starts hitting the higher ranges where the density of cases can goes down, the visa bulletin can move faster in later months. So let's say in early months, to increase the visa bulletin by 10,000 numbers, that might increase, let's say, I'm just going to pick a number. Maybe that reveals 5,000 case numbers, right? So, which would be a 50% density. If the density has gone down to 20% and they're trying to reveal 5,000 case numbers, actual cases, right? Then they would need to make 25,000 the increase in a single month to reveal 5,000 new cases if the density is down at 20%. So as the density drops, which it does in later numbers for Africa, EU, and Asia, as the density drops, the numbers can increase in speed a little bit later. But we don't know when the density drops, and we won't know until January the 1st, okay? So what does all this mean? It means that, yes, it's a slightly disappointing visa bulletin. I agree with your comment, slightly disappointing in a sense. At least we did see increases, doubling in of numbers in Africa and in EU, and almost doubled in Asia. Good increases, reasonable increases in Oceania and in South America. So, at least it was better than the previous 3 months in terms of increases, right? Okay, so yeah, good question. I'm glad you asked that one. Simon, I'm the one who got the study visa for Canada. My CN is 57K from Algeria. Yes, I do remember. I've seen some comments about the US Embassy in Canada, and they are not positive at all. A lot of negative opinions. Right, but you live in Canada, right? So the negative comments that you will probably hear is that their use of the DS5535 is fairly high. It's true. The Montreal Embassy, for some reason, tend to issue these DS5535s in fairly high numbers. And because you're from Algeria in Canada, I think there's a reasonably high chance of that happening to you. And so, yes, it's a bit of a risk. You would have less risk of the DS5535 in the Algerian US Embassy. But you tend to get the interview where you live. That's how KCC want to make it happen. Okay, so if you want to try and move yourself to Algeria, for the interview, you can do that, but you're sort of introducing a risk. And the way you generally do that is by informing KCC that you've moved and you want to be interviewed in your new country of residence, which you would say Algeria. You can, if you've got connections to a country, like you've previously lived there, you've got family there, you can leverage that a little bit to help KCC move you. But in general, KCC are fairly firm in keeping people attached to the embassies where they live, even if that means that the person has less chance of an interview or less chance of a successful outcome from the interview, right? They're not interested in your chances of being approved, right? Or they're not interested. I would say that seems a bit wrong to say it that way, but they're not in control of who misses out because of a bad embassy behavior. But anyway, that's about the worst thing I would say about Montreal. But again, we're basing that information on last year's data. So who knows how they're going to be in the future? We don't really know for sure. So you have to make your choice and move ahead with that choice. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. Okay, when can we expect 2NLs? Every month the cadence is the same. Between the 8th and the 15th, we get the visa bulletin, roughly speaking, between the 8th and the 15th. It has, on occasion, come out as early as the 7th. I think it may have come out on the 6th one time, but that's rare. It's generally between, after the 8th or on the 8th and after the 8th, and it was this month. And it's usually out by the 15th. And again, there's been some months when it's been later than that, but it's usually out by the 15th, thereabouts. Then, in the second half of the month, the 2NLs are sent out. The later the visa bulletin is, the more quickly we see the 2NLs going out after the visa bulletin, right? And the visa bulletin came out fairly early this month, so it will have caught KCC out a little bit, and therefore there'll be 2, 3, 4 days delay before we start getting 2NLs, okay? And today, by the way, is a holiday in the USA. It's Veterans Day, celebrating people who served in the military. So people at KCC are not working today. They're not sending out 2NLs today. Okay, so expect to have 2NLs probably start to be sent out, let's say, middle of next week. Okay. I've submitted my DS260 about 3 months, but not receiving my 2NL. Case number 38K, Africa, Senegal. Can everybody explain to Al Kazim, who apparently has been living under a rock for the last little while? Your case number is not current yet at 38K. You're not going to get a 2NL until your case number is current. It doesn't matter if you submit your DS260 early. Unless your case number is current, you're not getting an interview. That's how it works. Okay, so there is not a surprise that you haven't had your 2NL. It's totally normal. I understand we have to wait for the data in January, but do you think 51K is a high number for Egypt? I have no idea, because I don't know where Egypt cuts off in terms of the cases. So I have no idea. I think I've heard an Egyptian number much higher than that, actually, but I'm not 100% sure. So, you have to wait and see. What's the chances of winning for Europe? Okay, so the chances of winning, the chances of selection in a lottery is a factor of how many people enter in any given region, right? And the entries are relatively low this year compared to DV 2024, lower than DV 2024. Not as low as DV 2021, though, which was the data I showed in a video the other day, right? So that's one part of the puzzle, how many people enter. And then how many people are selected. They can choose to select any number of selectees between about 80,000, which is considered to be a low number of selectees, up to about 142,000, which is the highest number we've seen, which is what we see in DV 2024. I've seen 140,000 selectees selected before in my year, funnily enough, DV 2014, and then DV 2015 had 125,000. So we're, the 140,000 number is obviously too many people. And so you could get selected in a year where your chance of selection is higher because they're selecting more selectees, but your chance of being able to process to the end and get your green card is lower in those years, because if you've got a high case number, you're never going to get an interview, right? So, so there you go. In DV 2024, the chance of selection was about 1 in 300 years, or about 0.3% selection, right? And the chance of getting a green card is, probably half of those people are just not even going to get a chance, right? 140,000 selectees. It takes 70,000 selectees being scheduled for interview to issue the 55,000. Okay, so out of the 140,000 selected, some number will never fill in their DS260. They're not interested. They just entered the lottery and they weren't really serious. Some number, let's call that 10%. And then some number will, the other 90% will fill in the DS260. They'll be hoping for an interview. Some of them will get an interview, some of them won't. And those that get an interview, not all of them will get approved. Some will be refused straight away. Others will get a temporary refusal. So roughly speaking, the 140,000 number goes down and down and down. First, the people who don't proceed, then the people that don't get an interview, then the people that get an interview but they're refused, and then the other people that get issued, right? So that's how the filtering process goes down, right? So probably this year, the chance of selection in most regions is probably going to be closer to 1 in 200, I would imagine, for DV 2025. But we'll know better later on. We'll know better once we see the stats after the selection is announced. Okay. Procura says, I've learned a lot from you. I'm DV AF 57K. Entered my case number at visa status check and was told my case number is invalid. What could be the reason, or what should I or when should I start checking? The when is the right question. The DV24 cases can't be checked in the status check system until January 1. So when I tell people all the time, wait until January because then we'll have more data, it's because then is when we'll have the data from the SEAC status check system. So you can check 100 times a day right now and it's not going to give you an answer. It's always going to tell you invalid. And it will say that for any DV 2024 case. But on January 1, at Mountain Time in the USA, magically the cases appear, okay? Because the database programmers at the government apparently are about 11 years old. Beckett Fitz, do you expect the UK to be in the DV 2026 lottery? Maybe. I think so. I think there's a chance. There's the COVID glitch, if you like, gave us sort of a 2-year window of low immigration numbers, and that is what brought the UK into the lottery process for this year. That 2-year window is going to sort of move through the process. So there's a 5-year window, which is a sort of a rolling 5 years. In the previous 5 years, how many people emigrated to the USA from each country in 3 types of immigration, not DV lottery, not asylum. It's family-based, work-based, and immediate relative. And so on those three types, how many people came? Now, the UK sends around about 10 to 12,000, 10 to 13,000 each year. So on a rolling 5 years, their numbers are normally about 60,000, let's say 55 to 60,000, which is too high to be included because the rules of the lottery want a rolling 50,000 number over 5 years. But COVID caused a dip in 2 years. That means 3 years were at the regular number and 2 years are at a lower number, right? And as those 2 years move through the 5-year sample, we might see the UK sort of in and out of the lottery for a 2 to 3 year period while that number drops out, right? Those numbers drop out. It's a bit tight because the numbers are fairly close for the UK. I think you'd have to have a look at the numbers, or I'd have to have a look at the numbers. I'll probably do a video on that and show exactly how that's happened. But basically, it's likely to stay in for DV 26, maybe even 27. But it won't be long. So make hay while the sun shines, as they say. Did BritSimon answer the question about the UK being in future DV lotteries? Yeah, that's the one I just answered, yeah. Please describe in details the cause of people to be in AP. Why are some people given the DS5535? Okay. That's 2 questions. The first one is, why are some people in AP? And we describe AP these days. AP is administrative processing. We describe it these days as 221G, which is the real technical name for it. It's the section of the law that deals with that particular event, right? Administrative processing is the name that we've given it for years, and the government staff generally call it AP as well. Okay, so why do you go into AP? It can be as simple as you turn up for your interview and you're missing some document, right? You're supposed to take your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, all of those things, and you forget a document, or you don't have a document, or maybe your medical hasn't been reported yet, right? And so you're not able to present that. So first way of getting AP is you don't have some document at the interview, right? The next thing is you have all the documents, but let's say the CEO wants to review some of the documents and says, I'm not quite sure about your education because you were educated in Algeria and you're living in Canada, and we don't know the Algerian school system and we don't know what this document means, right? So in that case, I'm going to put you on AP while I check what your document means. And all they do is they contact the US Embassy in Algeria and they say, what does this document mean? And that takes some time, right? So those first two sorts of examples, missing document or them confirming a document that you've provided, those can take a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks to resolve, right? Depends how quickly you come up with the missing document. Then there's other types of AP. There are some types of AP that are caused by something in your background check that says they need to take additional checks about you, right? And in some cases, they'll therefore have you fill out a DS-5535. The DS-5535 has a detailed sort of background information, set of questions. Where have you lived before? What work did you do? Social media history. Now, these questions have all been answered on the DS-260. And it's really critical. I don't understand why people don't understand this point. But it's really critical that your DS-260 is good and that it's complete. Because if you have a full history of on your DS-260, then you're less likely to be asked for a DS-5535 because you've given all of the information. It makes perfect sense. Your timelines all look right. You know, everything is right. You've done a good job on your DS-260. Some people decide that they know better than the government, and the government's asking for 10 years of history for address or whatever it might be. But they think, what do the government need to know that? I'll just put my most recent address, right? And then that's the sort of thing that makes the government think, I don't know, maybe that doesn't seem right. We better check that. And so then they'll give you the DS-5535. You'll answer the same questions again. And now you're providing them more information, which they're going to do more checks on. Okay. So it's foolish to not fill in your DS-260 correctly, right? It's also foolish to listen to those people that say, don't unlock your DS-260 because it will cause you delays. Those people don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's better to have an accurate, complete DS-260, right? Now, I'm not suggesting you start unlocking your DS-260s for really simple, trivial reasons, but I'm hoping that you are all smart enough to have filled in your DS-260s properly, completely, put in all of the education, all of the address history, all of the travel history, all of the social media history, all of that stuff that's important for them to be able to do a complete background check. Because if you get to interview and on your file, KCC have made a note that they couldn't properly background check you because your DS-260 was incomplete, then you're going to get a DS-5535. And that background checking will be done after your interview based on the information you give in the 5535, right? And you just caused yourself a delay for what I think is an avoidable reason, right? Now, there are another group of people, particularly Iranians, particularly some people at some embassies, who are just going to receive a DS-5535 anyway because they commonly issue that, okay? Iranians are going to get additional background checks that will last 4 or 5 months anyway, right? There's not much you can do about that for Iranians because Iran as a country doesn't want to cooperate with America and so on, right? So, so there are some things you can avoid in terms of AP. There are some things you can't avoid, and but please do everything you can to avoid it. Go to your interview with well-prepared documents. Have copies of documents that you want to keep, so you can give them the copy and keep the original. Have your documents well ordered. Have them, nicely presented. Don't laminate documents that aren't already laminated because it can give the impression you're trying to hide something about the document. But have all your documents there. Read the bloody instructions. I can't stress that enough. Read the bloody instructions, right? And make sure you've got the complete set of documents you need, and have additional documents too. If your embassy, might ask you for an I-134, have that ready if you can, right? If you can get someone that you know in the USA to give you an I-134, do that. If not, perhaps you've got loads of money in the bank account. Be prepared with some financial documentation. If that's not a possibility, then be prepared to discuss what work opportunities you've got in the USA, right? Because maybe you're in a particularly attractive job or industry, like programming or like being a doctor or something like that, so that they're not going to be concerned how you're going to make a living in the USA. All of those things are things that you can control in terms of preparing for the interview to reduce the chance of AP. Okay. Now, some people will still get AP, but you can certainly reduce the risk of that. Okay. So there you go. I described in detail. I hope that was okay for you. Hey Simon, EU 30,500. What do you think when we will get scheduled for interview? I know January that we will know more, but I want to know your opinion. My opinion? Okay. What you want to know when you'll get scheduled for the interview? Do you want to know the day of the week, the time? I'm being silly. I'm not going to give you a prediction, right? You know that. If you've ever seen my videos before, Sarah, I don't like predicting. I'll give you the information. You can make a common sense, sort of guess yourself. But until January, we don't know how high your number is. So, nope, I'm not going to try and predict it. Does Hep B exclude me from the visa and cause me problems in the interview, sir? No. If you'd have gone to my blog, BritSimonSays.com, you could have read the fact where I list the 4 diseases that can cause a problem, and Hep B isn't one of them. So it's not a problem, nor is AIDS, by the way. How common is it for people to get denied a visa at interview? Roughly speaking, to issue 55,000 visas, there will probably be about 10,000 people, roughly, who will have gone to interview and don't get their visa because they either get refused straight away or they're put on AP and that time's out. So roughly speaking, about 10,000. There'll be another 5,000 or so that don't even show up for their interview. And in total, therefore, to issue 55,000 visas, they will schedule about 70,000. Okay, and by the way, that number has been pretty clear. The chaos that happened in DV 2023 of stopping at the last minute was predictable because they got to 70,000 scheduled interviews and then kept on going. And I was saying, this can't work, right? I don't know what's going to happen. They increase the number of visas that they issue, they go over the limit, or this can't work. And, I made that very clear to people. And unfortunately, they just slammed the gate at some point. They did go over the 55,000 by about 1,000. But nevertheless, they scheduled too many people. So 70,000 is kind of the magic number. You don't want to see them going over 70,000. If they go over 70,000 scheduled interviews in DV24, then I will be predicting interview cancellations, because we now know that's how they're going to operate. Hope that all high case number will have interview in DV 2024. Well, you can hope that, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Does Asia Bulletin seem optimistic? It was released yesterday, 5,500. It's not optimistic for high numbers. Nothing is optimistic for high numbers in Asia or the other regions. There's no indication from the visa bulletin that they're planning to get to the 54,000 numbers, right? They're 4 months into a 12-month process, and they've got and the number they've got to is about 10% of the highest case number for Asia, right? That should tell you something. Africa, yeah, it's not stunning. 22,000. There was a good increase in the 3 except countries, but it's not It's not like really exciting progression. I'm hoping we'll see better progression in February, for February interviews, and particularly for March, April, May. February through May, June is the real powerhouse. That sort of 4-month period of interviews is when the year is either made or broken. So that's what we want to see. I do hope, though, when we see the January the 1st data, the SEAC data, I do hope they've issued, they should have issued by that time at least 5,000 visas, maybe 7,000. That would be optimistic. But if they've only issued 2,000 or 3,000, that would be not a good sign. Okay. Taruku says, my case number is AF9K, but I didn't get in to andl. What can I do? From Ethiopia. The problem is your embassy. Your embassy is misbehaving, as they did in 22 and 23. And so you're probably going to be okay, but you're just going to have to be patient. You're assuming your DS-260 was submitted early and processed quickly, then you're in the queue for the embassy. So you can't move at this point, but you're just going to have to wait and be patient, because they'll get to your interview, but not as quickly as they should have done. They're not interviewing enough people to clear out all of the expected interviews every month. That's basically the problem. That's what bad behaving embassies do. Okay. Which numbers should we consider high in Africa? Kindly update the visa bulletin in your website. Okay. So yes, I'll update the historical visa bulletin numbers in the website for sure. What do I consider high numbers? Anything from sort of 70, 80,000 and above this year is really a high number for Africa. 50,000 is probably not high. 60,000 is probably not high. The 50s and 60,000s could be high for individual countries, but not for the region as a whole. Okay. AF50K performance of Addis Embassy. Addis has not been great for the last few years, or the last couple of years, so that's going to be a problem there. AF55-700 Cameroon. Cameroon's not so bad. UND is performing reasonably well, or has been. So I would be hopeful for that sort of case number. So I'd rather be 55,700 in Cameroon than 55,700 in Nairobi, let's say, right? Eric Jr., what was the motivation of passport requirement in the entry during Trump's time? Was it trying to achieve yet the permitted 55K yearly by law? Was he trying to achieve yet? And I don't understand what you're trying to say in that second part, but what was the motivation of the passport requirements? It was to cut down the fraudulent entries, right? Before the passport requirement was introduced in DV 2021, there were 6.7 million entries. In DV 2024, there were 22 million entries, right? So so there's big increase these days, and we saw a big increase. Where's my notepad? Let me just get the numbers. Yeah, so DV21 had 6.7 million entries. DV22 had 7.3 million entries. That's after, by the way, let me make this. So DV 2019 and 2020 had 14 million entries each. It then went down in DV21 to, because of the passport requirement, to 6.7. DV22 and 23 had the passport requirement, right? And so it was 6.7 million. Let me just put this over here for you. Oh, blast. Now, move this across. Yeah, just so you'll be able to see this a little bit easier. Let me make this available to you. Like that. Okay. So yeah, these are the numbers. So DV 2019, these are the number of entries, right? DV 2019 and 2020, no passport requirement, right? Those two numbers. Then the passport requirement comes in, we've got a lot less entries. Why have we got less entries? Some people don't have passports, but more importantly, the passports gave them a way to avoid having people doing duplicate entries, because you had to have a passport number that was tied to your entry, right? Then they took the passport requirement away for DV 2024, and we had more than double the number of entries. Clearly a large number of fraudulent entries. And what do we get? We get a high number of holes, right? The holes are the duplicate entries. So the passport requirement the motivation was to reduce fraud, but when they took it away, they've actually achieved a reduction in fraud by having much smarter technology. Photo recognition software is being used extensively. So, you can take two different photos of the same face, and you might think you're being clever because you've got two different photos. But their systems, their optical recognition can recognize the person in the photo. It doesn't have to be the same exact photo. You can change your shirt, you can change the look of your face, you can change your hair a little bit. They're still going to know it's you, right? And so they're going to say, oh, well, this is a fraudulent entry, you're out. And not only are you out, you're then banned and marked as a duplicate entry fraudster for every future entry, every future lottery. So you screwed yourself, right? So, that's why they introduced the passport requirement to cut down fraud. I think, will they reintroduce it? They could have reintroduced it. The reason it was blocked was on a technical reason. They didn't implement it with the right amount of notice or a public notice period. They're supposed to have done a public notice period. They didn't do that. So some smart lawyer sued them and got the rule removed. And they could easily have said, okay, we're going to reintroduce that, but they didn't. And I think it's because they've got better fraud detection techniques now anyway. And in some countries, the cost of applying for a passport simply to enter a lottery where you've got a 1 in 200 year chance of being selected was kind of an unfair burden on those countries, right? So there are many people, particularly from Europe, who wouldn't understand why I say it's an unfair burden to have a passport requirement. But go to some of the poorer countries in Africa where the cost of a passport is a significant amount compared to the weekly wages someone would be earning, right? And so I'm glad they took the passport requirement away, because you shouldn't have to have a passport to simply buy, a DV, to enter the DV lottery. In the same way that you shouldn't have to have a bank account to buy a lottery ticket to win $1 million, right? Why is that a requirement, right? If I win the lottery, I'll open a bank account, if I'm winning the $1 million. If I win the DV lottery, I'll get a passport. That's fair. Okay. Talked about Hep B already. How do you know if your cash number is high or low? If your cash number is low, you can't afford to buy dinner. And your girlfriend will leave you. If your cash number is high, you're fine. Your girlfriend won't leave you, and you'll be able to buy a dinner. I bet you're not talking about cash number, though, are you? You're probably talking about case number. How do you know if your case number is high or low? I'm on the verge of another joke, but I shouldn't. I should take this more seriously. Okay, a case number being high or low is a relative thing, right? It's relative to the whole range. So you have to know the range of case numbers within the region. And so, for example, we now know that the highest case number is probably about 122,000 for Africa. So a case number of 60,000, which was high in DV 2023, is not high in DV 2024. It's relative to the highest case number. Okay, so unfortunately, you have to use a little bit of brain power and look at the highest case numbers. And if you want to know what the highest case numbers are, I can show you. The highest case numbers for each region are 100 that have been reported to me. Okay, these are the highest numbers that I know about. There could be higher case numbers. These numbers could be a little bit too high if they've been misreported to me. But Africa, 122,000, Asia, 54,000, 69,000 in Europe, 4,900 in Oceania, and 5,000 in South America. They're the highest case numbers that I know of. And, but you then need to know how many people are likely to become current, that's a bit more complicated, but you can at least consider, like, if you're Africa 10,000, you ask me if, is my case number high, I'm going to give you a sarcastic response, because you should know that 10,000 is a hell of a lot lower than 122,000, and you shouldn't be wasting my time with that question, right? If, on the other hand, you say, my case number is only 4,000, sounds great, in Oceania, I'm going to say to you, that's a high case number, and you're probably never going to get current, right? Because I know how many cases there are in that region. Okay, so that's how you think about it. It's relative to the highest case number and the number of people selected in your region, and that's why I'm showing you that data there. Is there an alternative embassy for Israel 2024 winners due to the war? No, not as far as I know. There's a particular problem, obviously, for Palestinians from the West Bank in particular, and in Gaza, of course. I mean, apart from the other problems that the Palestinians in Gaza have got, like, bombs being dropped on their head for no particular reason. That's one problem they've got. But people in the West Bank are probably also going to have problems in traveling, and Israelis are going to have problem with, because their embassy could be closed, could be difficulties. But there isn't a formal announcement yet of what those people should do, which other embassy in the region is prepared to take their cases. So there's not a lot of Israelis or Palestinians selected. So we'll have to wait and see how quickly things get better. It would certainly help, though, if Israel would back off, right? So maybe you could start sort of trying to influence that if you could, because that's what's making, what Hamas did was horrific, no doubt about it. It was terrorism. There's no other way to describe it. It was absolutely horrific. But whether you shoot a baby or whether you drop a bomb on a baby, to me, is killing a baby either way, right? So I feel no more, happy about what Israel is doing now than I do about what the Hamas terrorists did. And I don't want to see innocent Israeli children killed, and I don't want to see innocent Palestinian children killed. Thank you. It would be nice if we could stop all that nonsense over a couple of ridiculous religions. So there you go. Oh my God times, OMG times. Hi Brit, I'd like to know around when Africa got current last year, and when a region is current, is the scheduling process done randomly? Okay, Africa got current. So basically, there was a case number of 63,502, right? That particular number, that was literally the highest case number in DV 2023. For, I think, 2 or 3 months, the visa bulletin sat at 63,500. And so it meant that one case was not current, right? And then I think in the final month, perhaps the final 2 months, they put the word current there. So that final case, literally one case, became current. Okay, that happened at that point. So they got there. They basically became de facto current all bar that one case at 63,502. They became current, I think, for 4 months, right? The last 4 months of the year. But it was an unusual year because of the misbehavior of some embassies. So we would have to see that sort of misbehavior continue into this year in order to see something similar go on this year. That's, I keep reiterating that point. Okay. DV's AF66K from Kenya. Is it possible to get a 2NL mid next year? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know whether it will happen or not, but it's possible. Hello, please, dear, does happy? Oh man, I've answered that once. If how many people applied? I think you're probably trying to say there. I think probably about 15 million applied in DV25, just as a guess. We'll see the real number in May of next year. Accra Embassy likely to schedule interviews for January since they didn't schedule for October and December. How do you know, Lydia, they didn't schedule for October and December? Are you sure they didn't? Do you know that? Do you know someone at the embassy? I don't know that. And are they likely to schedule people in January? I don't know. I don't know anyone at the embassy. Perhaps you know better than I do. How many times do we have to check the status? Because it has a range of over 1 year. In May of next year, when we check the computer, it says we've not been selected. It's confusing. Did we check twice? Okay. I just want to reiterate what I said in a previous video a few days ago. There is a possibility in every year, there's a possibility there could be a second draw. So you check the announcement of results in May on the entry day, right? And if you say the words not selected, which most people will see, then keep your confirmation number and look again in about September or October. There have been years where a second batch, a smaller batch of winners was announced in that later time period, right? It can happen. It's not going to happen every year though, and it didn't happen obviously in DV24, because in DV24 we've already got 140,000 selectees. Why on earth would they add more people to that, right? And so it only happens in a low selection year. So in May we will find out how many, or we'll find out who's selected. In July or so, maybe August, we'll find out how many selectees they informed, and that will tell us whether or not there will be a second draw in September, October. If a low number of selectees have been informed, then there's a chance that there will be a second draw in September, October time. Okay, so you only check it. You don't need to check it every day. You just check it twice. Once in May, and then check again in October. Let's say. Okay. For current case numbers, there is probability of a highest case number. Okay, let me read that again. Is there a probability that a higher case? It can happen that higher case numbers get a 2NL before a lower case number. Yes, that can happen for various reasons. It can happen at the same embassy. It can certainly happen when you compare two different embassies. It depends when the DS-260 was submitted. It depends how long the DS-260 takes to process. Not all cases take the same time to process and so on, right? So yes, it can happen. Okay. Does 30K case number have any chance in Asia? I don't know. We're going to have to see the data. AS 17,000, does it have a good chance? I don't know. Probably, but we'll see in January. Is it really mandatory to have our police certificate stamped by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for our countries? Talking about Sudan specifically, we currently have a war and that's why it's hard. You have to read the instructions. When you read the instructions, it'll take you to specific instructions for the embassy and also the reciprocity pages, right? You have to read all of that because there are 180, 190 countries in the world that can enter the lottery, and there are different standards for documentation in those places. So for the country that you're talking about where you were, for example, you've got a education or a police certificate document from country A because that's where you did live, right? You would look at the reciprocity page that talks about documentation for that country. And then let's say you're interviewing country B. Now country B has certain rules, right? And they will also have a country-specific set of instructions. And it may say in that country, it may say that the certificates need to be validated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? I don't know off the top of the head what every country in 200 countries around the world considers to be normal, right? So there's no point asking me, but I would say to you, read the bloody instructions, right? And then you'll know the answer to this question. And then you won't have to ask me, okay? Okay. Can you do AOS on a tourist visa? AOS is adjustment of status. Not really. I mean, we're talking about a B1, B2 visa. They've generally got a 3-month timeline, can be up to 6 months. You can't work while you're here on a B1, B2. And so how are you going to support yourself for 3 or 6 months without working? That's kind of suspicious, and it may lead you to do something that would cause your case to be denied. i.e. working. You also might take longer than that. I mean, when you enter, you're not supposed to enter then immediately. I've just read the next thing. I'm going to laugh at this one. You're not supposed to enter and then immediately try and adjust status, right? Because when you entered on your B1, B2 visa, you were entering for tourism purposes, not to stay. So, it just creates all sorts of complications. It's risky. So I would generally say, look, it's technically possible. You don't do it unless you've got no other choice, unless you are guaranteed to lose your chance anyway, right? And so, don't generally do it, right? The next message that made me laugh. Can I activate the subtitles? You have a thick British accent. Thank you. Look, my name is BritSimon. The Brit in the BritSimon is a bit of a clue. I'm British. That's why I sound British, right? But you're coming to live in America. People in America speak English. You're going to have to learn how to understand English. And you may as well understand English as spoken by an Englishman or a British person. And if you can't understand me, then the problem is not my accent. I don't have an accent. I speak British. British English, right? So a thick British accent. Dylan Fard. I'll remember your name. Does confirmation number matters? There is belief out there. I've heard this before. It's so funny. The rumors that you hear is just hilarious. This rumor is if your confirmation number has 6 digits and 10 letters, you've already won. Guess what? That's bullshit. Why you people listen to this bullshit is beyond me. I don't know which. There's probably a YouTuber saying this, right? I'd love to know who's saying that. Who's saying that? Which one of these dopey YouTubers is saying that silly nonsense? Where is this rumor coming from? It's not true. It's bullshit, right? But please do let me know, Eric. If you heard that from a YouTuber, please let me know. I'd love to know which one of those buffoons is doing that. Allah Salah. Based on DV 2023 performances, Kuala Lumpur is considered to be a good embassy. AF 69K, not embassy shopping or anything, but I'm Sudanese, scattered around the world because of the war, of course. Kuala Lumpur, I think because they're not very big embassies, so we don't look at them and say, they've done loads of cases. They won't do loads of cases, but you could look at their data and see whether they had a backlog or not. It'd be very easy to do. And I've demonstrated how to do it many times. So please go ahead and look at Zarthesius's website and take a look at that website, at that data. Can I explain the chargeability case allocation on the visa bulletins? A bit confusing after having a read what the numbers actually mean. I don't know what you don't understand, but BritSimonSays.com, I publish every month. I publish when the visa bulletin is released. I publish an article there, and in there is a link to an explanation how to read the visa bulletin. So I think maybe just start there, and if you don't understand still, then you'll be able to ask me a more clear question next time I do a live. Okay. Comparing to last year and considering we have an idea about the highest case number that is more than 54,000. Where do you expect the visa bulletin to stop for Asia? I don't know. Oh, since you say it won't go current. I don't know. I do say it won't go current, but that doesn't mean I know where it will stop. I can put it this way. We've got a 5-gallon bucket, which is empty. We've got a 10-gallon or a 15-gallon container full of water. I can know that we're not going to get all of that water in there. I can just see that, right? But I don't know how much water we've really got. We've got a 15-gallon container, but it's got some water in it. And it looks pretty full, but I don't know how much it is. I know we've only got a 5-gallon container, a bucket to put water in, but I don't know when it's going to run out, right? I don't know how much is going to get spilled. There's a lot of that hasn't happened yet. So I'm not going to tell you exactly where we're going to get to because I don't know. Okay. Right. Couple more questions. Introverted content creator again. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I know a CN of 71K and 85K in Egypt, which I'm 100% sure about. In that case, is 51K in Egypt likely to get current? Dude, come on. If you know, let's say you're sure that there's, okay, here's how you work it out. You really didn't need to ask me this question. If you know the number of people selected in Egypt, and you know that the highest case number for an Egyptian, just take 85K, right, as a rough guesstimate, right? Plot how many people, how many selectees there are per 1,000, and multiply by 51,000, and see what that number looks like. Is that number less than 3,800? Then that should be okay. Now, that doesn't mean that the embassy is going to work at full performance, right? And you should know that, but you could work out mathematically whether 51K in relation to 85K is going to be within the right numbers, right? That really is fairly simple math and pretty much common sense, right? So you can do that. I know you listen to enough of my videos to know how to do that sort of calculation. So go do that. Let me know your numbers. Show me you're working, as they would say. Melania, Donald Trump's wife, probably. Obviously, Melania Trump probably still needs a green card because I'm not sure she ever legally got here. But if the visa bulletin goes current, and last visa bulletin was around 60K, shall someone with a case number 80K be called for an interview? If the last, yes, it can happen. Current means any number, including the highest case number, right? So it could happen. It depends on the embassy and whether they get current or not. Okay, let's see if I can find one more. Cheers. Okay. If I do get selected and pop over on a B2 from the UK and stay for 5 months to adjust status, would this be okay? Your plan is likely to fail. I explained why a few minutes ago, MIG HD. Yeah, your plan is likely to fail because you're not supposed to start the adjustment of status process the day you arrive, right? There used to be not a rule, but a suggestion that you waited at least 60 or 90 days before filing for adjustment of status. It's like you came on a tourist visa, you were having such a great time in America, and you said, oh man, I wish I could live here. Hey, I've won that green card lottery thing. I'll adjust status. That's how the process is supposed to happen. You're not supposed to come over here with a plan to adjust status because when you enter on the B1, B2, you're not supposed to be coming here to live. You're supposed to be going home, right? So you have to wait 2 or 3 months before you file to adjust status. Then the process can last several months, so that can be a problem. You've got to be current. You can't file until you're current. I mean, timing is a problem. Not working is a problem. It's a problem, right? So just stay in London. London's a great embassy. You can process there. Okay. Let me just answer this one last question because I say this a million times, but every time I can. There's more questions I'd like to answer here. I might have to go for another couple of minutes. Okay, does unlocking the DS260 actually move your queue? No, it doesn't. The day of your first submission is the order in which your case will be processed. Unlocking DS260 doesn't change that. Only if you add a derivative such as a spouse that needs checking and that sort of thing can it cause you a delay. Okay. Next question. My daughter's teeth were showing on the DV photo I used for applying. Would it be bad? She smiled a little bit. That's fine. They're not going to deny you for that. If I marry my girlfriend after getting a green card, can she get one? I didn't include her in the lottery as we're not married and want to marry anytime soon. If you won the green card and you're with a girlfriend that you want to stay with, marry her now and include her in the process. You would add her to your DS260. You would get married, add her to your DS260, create a DS260 for her, and you both go to America as a married couple, right? Go ahead and do that. bringing a spouse that you marry later after you've got your green card takes a long time. So much better to include her in the process if you've got a genuine relationship. Okay, that should be the last question I answer. But thank you for joining me this morning. Sorry about the sound issues earlier, and please, by all means, do subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it, and please make sure you tap the bell icon so that you get notified when I create a new video. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.